You know what, Chad? We're a little team. Me as the host who could still do it, and you as a student who can do it, just not as good. I'm proud of us. On this episode of Moving Panels, we discuss Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Welcome to Moving Panels, the podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows based on, inspired by, and adapted from the world of comic books. I'm your host, Laramy Wells, and joining me in the co-host chair today is Chad Smith. How are you, Chad?
I'm doing great, Laramy. Just really looking forward to this one. This Spider-Man, to me, is much the way that you described Superman as your kind of inspiration and entry into this world, and I just love this and ready to get into it.
Oh yeah, Spider-Man was just like, I had Spider-Man pajamas. I had the little, I had like a spider bike, like a little motorcycle. Mm-hmm. So I was all into Spider-Man.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm meaning more in the like philosophical way that you were so inspired by Superman.
I get you.
Yeah, Spider-Man to me is that like approachable every kid, which is of course the entire point of the movie that we're about to get into. So
yeah, very much so. So we are talking about the animated Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. We had Tobey Maguire's trilogy in the 2000s. We had just been introduced into Andrew Garfield's, and it is we have teased into the Tom Holland Spider-Man by this point. But this movie was released. We're really close to an anniversary here. It's released on December 14th, 2018. So this was a Christmas movie.
Yeah.
I don't have an awful lot about the background of this movie. I know that it was announced right around the same time that Sony had their massive leak, their internet leak. This came around. They said, okay, we're going to do we're relaunching Spider-Man, but as animated. And then people were very curious how that was going to work with the fact that the MCU was bringing Spider-Man in,
right?
Tom Holland. And then, of course, it was announced it was Miles Morales, and comic book geeks just lost their mind.
Yeah.
Because that's what a lot of people had been wanting. We want Miles Morales. So we'll get into the characters in a minute. One thing I do want to talk about with the movie is, so it was produced and I think written by Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, who, I mean, if you want to talk about being able to do comedic animated movies, these are the guys behind Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. These are the guys behind the Lego Movie.
Yeah, and they had just been fired off of Solo and were given this.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, because there was a lot of talk, when it finally did get nominated for an Oscar as Best Animated Feature and everything, is it being kind of like their redemption statement from that, which, I mean, I don't know if you can make that case because obviously it's two extremely different projects. Maybe they weren't a good fit for one, whatever. But yeah. They had just been canned on that and got shoved into this very fortuitously, I think, for us as an audience. So
now I have to tell you, I was surprised when I'm watching the credits, and I also see on this, it was 3 names for produced. You had Phil Lord, Christopher Miller, and Avi Arad. Avi Arad's name appeared as a producer, and I was like, it's been so long since I have seen Avi Arad's name pop up on a Marvel movie.
Yeah.
I can't even think of what the last one was that he did, because he was, of course, the guy behind all of the Marvel Studio movies of the early 2000s.
Right.
He was behind all of that. Yeah, I should have looked it up. Like, what was the last?
I didn't think about it.
Let's do it. This is the part of the show where Laramy Googles something really quick. Let's see. So he was a producer on the Amazing Spider-Man movies in 12 and 14. And so he's behind all the Spider-Man stuff because he was a producer on Venom, which came out the same year.
I did not know that. That's crazy.
He's and then Venom Let There Be Carnage, he's a producer. He's a producer of Morbius. So he's still got his hand on whatever Sony that license agreement was that
That's interesting.
That Sony and Marvel made. He's still got his hands on that. I mean, that the same guy who produced all those from the early 2000s. Not that they were all good, but Daredevil, Hulk, Punisher. Uh, and then Elektra, Man-Thing. And then I always like to throw this in, too. He was the producer of the Bratz movie.
Really?
Yes.
I did.
Like, he's got all of these comic book and then Bratz.
Oh, I did not know that. That's pretty funny.
And then the last thing I'll say about production is, of course, this movie also was one of the final cameos of Stan Lee, who had just passed away a month earlier from the release of this movie. So not only do we get a great cameo from Stan Lee, but we also get the in memory of at the end, pairing him up with Steve Ditko, who was also key in creating Spider-Man among many of those other characters.
Yeah, that, I don't know. That one makes me, a little teary-eyed when I watch that portion of it. Of course, I mean, it's a emotional portion of the movie anyways, but knowing that I can't remember now. I mean, it's been a few years, but I think it was maybe the last one that he recorded.
Actually recorded.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, but anyways, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into the characters because there are a bunch of them. So we will start off with the main character, the hero, Miles Morales, aka Spider-Man.
Yeah.
The character first appeared in Ultimate Fallout number 4, just a few years earlier, August of 2011. That is where we are introduced to Miles after the death of Peter Parker. So very similar to what happens, not the same way,
right,
but very similar to what happens in the movie, is he becomes Spider-Man following the death. And he actually starts off, they do it where he's doing a costume. He starts off wearing pretty much the Spider-Man outfit.
Right.
And then once people say to him, look, that's in bad taste, that's when he decides to change it to the black suit. So,
which I like the little kind of nod to that with him being made fun of in the movie for wearing his own merch. And then later you get the scene with Peter B. Parker where he's wearing a cape. What are you doing wearing a cape? And he rips it off him.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so good.
I thought it looked cool. No, it's not
disrespectful.
Cool. It's not cool. Yeah.
It's so good.
So let me ask you, Chad. So I know of Miles Morales, but I have read very little of Miles Morales. So can you inform us of your knowledge of Miles Morales?
Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of Miles Morales knowledge, not because of lack of wanting to know it, but that was very soon after I moved to Alaska. That first comic run of Miles Morales came out, and then I had kids, and as we all know, you don't get to have a life.
Oh, yeah.
So
that takes some time out.
Yeah, so I had to actually dip back in just because of this, because I was interested in Miles after the movie and everything. But yeah, interesting character altogether. Just a lot of the same powers. He's actually, you can make the argument that he's more powerful than our Peter Parker normal Spider-Man, but he's also just, I kind of like how the character has both in the comics and in the film just has this a little bit more innocent quality, and that's saying a lot because Peter obviously is a pretty innocent kid too, but he's got quips and all this kind of stuff, whereas Miles kind of wears his heart on his sleeve a little bit, and I think it makes for a pretty endearing character.
Yeah, I like that, and again, I don't know what it is in the comics. I did read the Spider-Verse, so we'll get into that in the moving panels. So I know that level of the story.
Right.
But yeah, I didn't go into the back parts and all that. I like that this movie doesn't really, it was like, okay, look, he's the new Spider-Man. Look, here's a radioactive spider. He's going to get bit by it. Voila, there you have it. And they explain nothing about where did the spider come from? Why is there another radioactive spider?
Well, they give you a little bit because it keeps doing the same. It clearly was not from however you want to word it, that world. It was brought there because of the rift, because it does the same. What is it that Peter B. Parker's character later
glitches?
Yeah. When his atoms aren't liking being in this world. So I think. And they just sort of left you with that. That's the way it happens. But you don't get, this long drawn out origin story. I do, however, love the anticlimactic element of that when the spider bites him and he barely even realizes it and just reaches down and kills it and brushes it off. It's one of my favorite scenes.
I know in the comics, though, they do give an explanation for the spider that bites Miles, that it's a genetically engineered spider that Norman Osborn is working on. Kind of that Lex Luthor Superman kind of dynamic where he's trying to find out the source of Spider-Man's powers. So I do know there's that aspect of it. In fact, while we're on Norman Osborn real quick, what were your thoughts about this take on the Green Goblin?
It's super interesting. I mean, he's apparently lost his humanity altogether in this particular universe, and is just I don't know. It was kind of fun in the sense that it's like the opposite of Smart Hulk. He just became all monster instead of keeping his intelligence. It clearly thematically works because you need the giant, power monster that's not thinking things through to hold Peter Parker into the antimatter stream that brings the Spider-Verse into existence and everything. So thematically it worked. It's kind of interesting. And he seems to have perished. I mean, you never see the character again.
What happened to him. Yeah, what happened to him?
He's dead, I think. Like, he's just laying there. Miles walks right in front of him after the whole machine collapse deal. And no, it's pretty interesting. Yeah, I do like that you'd never see Norman Osborn. Just this terrible monster
giant
version.
Dragon looking, Miles Morales in this, we got to talk about, he's voiced by, I think it's pronounced Shameik Moore, which, not a really well-known, I would say, actor. He has appeared in a few things, but not, mainstream in my personal opinion.
Right.
He's been in a few movies and a few television things and whatnot. And I was honestly surprised when I did look him up to find out. Find out he's a grown man.
Yeah, because he sounds like a kid in this film. Yeah, I'm actually kind of pulling for him because he's like, in a lot of his pictures you see him of, he has facial hair and stuff like that. So he clearly is the grown man you're referring to. But I am sort of hoping he gets to play the character in the MCU
live
sooner.
action.
Yeah, because he could play a young guy. Like, I feel like if he shaved or whatever. But
oh yeah, and he's from Atlanta, so I gotta give him the credit there too.
Yeah.
Moving on, let's talk about Peter B. Parker. I love how they just threw the B in there to separate him
so
from
the two. Yeah, I mean,
the other Peter Parker.
That's how you tell the difference.
For those of you who don't know, I mean, Peter Parker's middle name is Benjamin.
Yeah,
and so that wasn't like something crazy to call him Peter B. Parker, and it had no basis in comics other than that is his middle name.
Yeah.
So as far as I'm concerned, even though he might be from a different dimension, this is a Spider-Man. There's nothing different about his background and his story that we have not seen in the main line of Spider-Man.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
We do find out, I don't remember if they say it exactly, but he does kind of lay out a timeline, and we find out that he's in his late 30s.
Mm.
And so, and of course he's lost some of his spider definition, muscle definition. But I love how, as he's telling the stories, he's saying like, I was at my apartment, doing some crunches,
getting strong. It shows him eating pizza. Who was voiced by Jack? I always do this. Jake Johnson, big Jack Johnson fan. Also, super confusing. I was very unsure of that the first time I heard the casting. I mean, and to be fair, that world Spider-Man, who, spoilers if you haven't seen the movie, is killed in the first 10 minutes? I mean, it's pretty quick. it's Chris Pine. So you have Chris Pine cast, and then you have Jake Johnson. Big fan, love New Girl.
Yeah,
but
love New Girl.
Was sitting here going, I don't know about this, and he kills it.
Yeah, he does a great job. Now, going into your casting, were you aware that they actually did consider Tobey Maguire for the voice?
Yeah, I remember hearing that.
I thought that would have been fun.
Yeah.
And we'll get to this in the movie panels. There's also a reference to him in the comic run.
Yeah.
So we'll get to that. But yeah, so we got Peter B. Parker as the mentor of our new Spider-Man, Miles Morales, even though he's a little mentor. Yeah, that's what I was
reluctant mentor. We'll say that
doesn't really want to begin with. I love his line of when he tells them to start swinging when they're escaping from the facility. And he goes, but I don't know how. And he's like, well, the best time to learn is in a life-threatening crisis.
Yeah. It's so good.
Next up, we've got who I think probably takes the third lead in this, and that is Gwen Stacy, Spider-Woman, or we just throw it all together and we call her Spider-Gwen. She debuted actually in the storyline that led to this movie.
Right.
She debuted in Edge of Spider-Verse #2 in 2014. And pretty much her story is the Peter Parker story, just flipped. She's the one that gets bit and not Peter. So she gets the powers. And then just like in the main storyline, Peter ends up falling to his death and she couldn't save Peter. And so instead of Peter not being able to save Gwen, it's just flipped on its side there.
You see, and she later, because she has her own run as Ghost Spider, not called Spider-Gwen anymore and everything. But I'm trying to remember the run where it's actually directly taken in the movie. So that Peter becomes Lizard and she can't save him. He perishes. It even references, in the movie, it references her saving her dad, which that's a cool run. Her dad holds her at gunpoint and unmasks her and kind of kicks her out of town almost. And she goes on the lam and goes to the UK where she meets Spider UK, which, what a incredible name character that is. Yeah. But anyways, yeah, so they did take quite a lot of the elements directly from the books for this particular character.
I just found it interesting that her character comes into this dimension, this world, and her immediate thought is, I need to infiltrate the high school.
Yeah, she says her spider sense told her that. I'm like, man, your spider sense is a lot more explicit than all the other
Yeah.
But anyways.
I always love, though, how when they meet each other, the spider sense is like them, seeing each other and knowing. It's like they all of a sudden all know like who each other is. I didn't.
So to be fair, no, you're right, except for when Miles Morales and Gwen meet. They're the only ones that don't.
True.
I didn't think about that until you just said that.
I didn't think about that either.
Yeah, everybody else did except for them.
That is true.
Oh,
That's
man.
Weird.
We found the one plot hole. So.
Uh-oh. Yeah. Gwen Stacy is voiced by Haley Steinfeld, who is now a part of the MCU as Kate Bishop on the show Hawkeye. And there's actually a lot of other connections we're going to get into of people who are actually part of the MCU. But that takes care of Spider-Gwen. We'll move on to the other three. We'll probably hit these pretty quickly. Spider-Noir, Spider-Man Noir, who debuted in the comics in an actual short little run called Spider-Man Noir back in February 2009. The way this character, as they kind of they kind of want to show, and they do it very quickly. He's bitten by a spider that came out of an ancient artifact, and they kind of imply that his powers, if you read the comic, they kind of imply that his powers are more mystical.
Yeah.
because he passes out and he has this vision of a god and the spider, totem or whatever.
Right.
And that's where he gets his powers from. And then we have him in this movie voiced by Nick Cage.
Yeah. Who also does a phenomenal job.
Yeah.
His whole obsession with the Rubik's Cube.
Yeah.
I'm taking this with me. And he returns to his world.
At least we get to see him solve it. And we get to see at the end, we get to see that he solved it.
And just the whole punching Nazis thing. Like, it's a cool character. It also is weird to me. So this is a total nerd side note. It's like the only Earth that has a 5-digit number is his home Earth. It's like 9,000, 54 or whatever. I can't remember the actual number, but it's, most of the rest of them are 2-3 digits tops. And then apparently to get that weird, you got to go way out in the multiverse. So, but anyways,
I always find it fun when they number. They do this in DC too when they number the universes. It's like, is there any reason for this number?
Right.
It's because they established that Michael Keaton's Batman is in like Earth 90.
Yeah. Why?
Or Earth 89, whatever. Yeah. And it's because that's when the movie came out.
Yeah.
And they do things like that. But yeah, that big number, you're like, shouldn't it just be like Earth 32? Because it's taking place in the 30s.
Yeah.
I don't know how it's going. Then we also get Penny Parker, who also, just like Spider-Gwen, debuted in the Spider-Verse comics, also in Edge of Spider-Verse, number 5. The way that her story works is that there is a radioactive spider, but she doesn't get her powers, per se, from the radioactive spider. Instead, when the spider bites her and the spider have a psychic link.
Right. With a robot.
And then her father has built this mech robot thing, which the spider controls.
Right.
But she also controls, and in the comics, it makes it more sound like she controls it psychically versus her being actually like her entering the suit, we see happen in the movie. So yeah, that's a weird. I will say I love the anime style to her.
Right.
We didn't talk about that with Spider-Man Noir, where you could almost see the pencil etchings on him sometimes.
Yeah. And the wind is always blowing, no matter what.
Yes.
Whether they're in a building.
The wind with me. Yeah.
It's great.
Wherever I go, the wind goes. Or whatever it is he says.
Yeah.
So any thoughts about Penny Parker?
No, I mean, you kind of see what you get. Yeah. It's a cool character.
Yeah. And then we got probably the one who tries to steal some of the movie, and that is Peter Porker, Spider-Ham, who debuted actually a lot earlier than I think people probably would be surprised to find out. He debuted in Marvel Tales, that's Tales, Marvel Tales, starring Peter Porker, the Spectacular Spider-Ham, way back in November 1983.
Yeah.
I honestly was surprised to find out that he was that old.
Yeah. What a crazy choice to add to the movie. Like, you kind of want to sit in on the pitch meeting as they start to flesh this whole thing out. Because as we'll go into it in the moving panels section, like, these are a minute portion of the spider people that are used in the Spider-Verse run of the comics. Yeah. And so out of
well, but Gwen Stacy and Spider-Ham are a little bigger. Like, Gwen has her own little missions that she goes on that we see in the Spider-Verse storyline. And then Spider-Ham is always there to say something or do something.
I don't disagree with you, but if you were making a movie, I'm sure there were some executives that are like, we're not doing that, right? Like, we're kind of, because it definitely brings an entirely different dynamic to the storytelling. But
yeah, so they give his background story, but I do want to relay it because I just find this one hilarious. So he was actually a spider.
right, bitten by a radioactive
pig, which then turned him into a pig, but he still had the proportional strength of a spider.
And if you notice, he eats a lot of pork-based products, which is really comical, like through the whole thing. But it's very funny.
And he is.
Yeah, sorry. No, I was about to bring up the same thing.
He is voiced by John Mulaney.
Yeah.
Whatever your thoughts about the person, John Mulaney. John Mulaney is a funny dude.
Yeah, he is.
And so he does bring another level to that character.
What do you think of the well, that's all, folks line?
I liked it.
And then pointing out, can he legally do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, man.
I got a kick out of it.
Yeah.
There was something else, but I can't remember what it was now. I love when he at the end when they're all saying their goodbyes and he just hands Miles his mallet.
Yeah, it'll fit in your pocket. That and my other favorite part that he does is when they're all hovered on the ceiling of Miles's dorm room and his roommate is in there. They're trying to hide from the roommate. Yeah. Do animals have talking animals in this world?
I don't want to freak him out. I also love when he just drops the anvil on Scorpion.
Yeah.
Like just out of the blue, just anvil.
And the
and then Scorpion turns. I really think this was meant to be tongue in cheek, because it all depends on how you interpret it. Scorpion turns and he goes like, what are you supposed to be? Some sort of crazy animated cartoon? And he goes, wait, you have a problem with cartoons?
Yeah.
And it's almost like you're going, oh yeah, because he's also a cartoon.
Because we're all adults watching a cartoon and also like it's very meta. There's a lot going on there. But I also love the line when they're all trying to infiltrate Kingpin's party and they're sitting there, what a pig. I'm right here. It was so good.
Well, you mentioned Kingpin. Let's talk about Kingpin really quick. Voiced by Liev Schreiber. So there's another Marvel connection. The former Sabretooth from X-Men Origins Wolverine. A.k.a. the movie which shall not be named.
Yeah. Sheerly from a voice acting perspective, honestly, the most impressive to me. I could not have told you in 100 viewings of this that was Liev Schreiber had I not seen the credits and knew it. So I think he does a phenomenal job as well. What's your take on this Kingpin?
That's what I was about to ask you. Is what was your thought of the? So, you talked about Spider-Man, and I've said this on the podcast before. I got into Daredevil as one of my early comics, and of course, so I knew Kingpin and all. This Kingpin, big dude.
Yeah, brutal.
Very big dude. In fact, there's the part where Miles watches him pull up in the SUV, and I notice you don't actually see him get out of the SUV. You see the SUV pull up, and then in the next shot, he's standing next to the SUV.
He's too big. It wouldn't have looked right.
I'm like, how in the world? Yeah, I would have loved to have seen how they animated that.
Yep.
But here's my other question is, are they implying that maybe he has some sort of like superhuman strength?
It certainly seems that way.
I mean, he throws a car.
Yeah. And among other things. Yeah, he's I think so in this particular universe. I have kind of wondered, since we were just talking about Spider-Ham and his little bit of a meta joke about disliking cartoons and everything, I kind of think that this was a smart take on the villain in that sense. Like, they didn't stick with the mainline, way that you view Kingpin. And I also I don't know. I was unsure about them using Kingpin because, as you have mentioned, he is a Spider villain. You know, you see him in Spider-Man runs from time to time.
Yeah, he first appeared in Spider-Man. Yeah,
but I wouldn't call Kingpin a Spider-Man arch nemesis. He's not even close to being on Sinister Six level of Spider-Man nemesis intimacy, whatever you want to call it. So he is more known for his Daredevil runs these days, especially since, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Netflix Daredevil had already come out.
Yes.
So we've seen the Vincent D'Onofrio Daredevil a live screen. So this was I think it was smart in using a very different take on that character. And it was smart that they got away from the Spider-Verse books and the villain, Moreland, who is very not well known, I would say. So it was a good choice, even though I wasn't super happy about it when I first heard about it. I don't know if you had any kind of feelings about that one, but
no, I mean, and you are right. This Kingpin actually came. We were introduced to this Kingpin. The Netflix show had actually just finished the final season.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
I think it was like October was when they aired those episodes, and so now it's December. So yeah, it just finished that. Here's the other thing I want to talk about though with this Kingpin. Did they need to give him the wife and son story arc?
Well,
other than it being the motivator for wanting to open the dimensions,
right?
It almost gives him a little bit of being a sympathetic villain, and I don't think this Kingpin needed that.
I rarely think that being a sympathetic villain is a negative.
I agree.
I think most of the time it makes the story much more interesting. I do think that just from basic plot point, I don't know how you get to them building the collider without it. I mean, it would take something very similar anyways. And you do, and maybe this is a very small point, but you do also get that that's why he kills Spider-Man. The Chris Pine Spider-Man, because it makes him so enraged when Spider-Man tells him that, I saw what you were doing and it's not going to work. And that's why he kills Spider-Man, is because it made him so angry. So I think you have a kind of a string of things that it's very difficult to explain if you didn't have that storyline. But
oh yeah, I could see that. I think there was just this is a animated movie that's 2 hours long.
And is packed full of stuff.
Yeah, and it's packed full of stuff. So I think I'm more just looking for, is there something that maybe they could have taken out? But you got a point there, so I guess not. Let's move on really quick. What did you think of, there's probably not a lot to talk about here, but what did you think of Catherine Hahn's take on Doc Ock?
So it makes for one of the best lines in the movie when Peter B. Parker says that he'll have to how does he word it? Man, I wanted to write this down when I was rewatching it. He literally says, I'll have to review my personal biases. Something to that effect when Miles tells him that Doc Ock is a woman in this universe. It's one of my favorite lines in the entire thing. And it's so well done. Jake delivers it like so low key that you could just walk right by it and not catch it. It's great.
Yeah. Also, because I bet your friends call you Doc Ock, and she says no. They actually, I forgot what her first name was, but she says no. They actually call me Claire or whatever it was.
Yeah, I can't remember now.
Yeah, and she goes, my enemies call me Dr. Octopus.
I like the whole take though. Like she's visibly different. She went with a more organic, material. Than the metal ones that we're used to. You don't get like the heavy. You get a white lab coat, not the, I guess Doc Ock wears a white lab coat too sometimes, but you often get more of like a trench coat look from the Doc Ock that we know now, and it's pretty. I like her standing up to to Kingpin when you get those little interactions between the two of them. She does a great job. Her semi-psychotic voicings, how she just immediately starts poking and prodding Peter B. Parker and to his face is letting him know that he's no more than a fly she's put on a board and is going to tear apart, kind of thing. It's very interesting.
So, to my knowledge, though, this Doc Ock has no connection to the comics.
Correct. I don't know of any other. Yeah.
That this was a special Dr. Octopus created for this movie. I also read rumors that apparently Catherine Hahn and the director are really good friends. So it was his way of getting her. Of course, I also wanted to mention her because she's also already in the MCU now as Agatha Harkness. Agatha Harkness. I'm going to get it all right.
Yeah.
There we go. And Disney, of course, just announced that apparently she's getting her own Disney Plus show.
Yep.
Coming, so we'll get to see more of her.
So before we leave, do you see the that she's shown to you very early in the movie? So she's the video playing in science class when Miles comes in late, but
yeah, because Miles even mentions that later. He goes, "I saw her in a documentary in class." Okay, moving on to Aaron Davis, the Prowler. I figured he deserved acknowledgement here. Now, in the comics, he also was the Prowler. He was not the first Prowler.
Mm-hmm.
He takes on the mantle of the Prowler. He, of course, first appeared in Ultimate Spider-Man #1 in November of 2011 when Miles Morales was taking over. And got another Marvel connection here. He is voiced by, and I'm going to butcher this, Mahershala, is that how you pronounce his name?
Yeah.
Ali, who, of course, is now Blade in the MCU.
Yep.
So
he's another one. I spoke too soon earlier about Liev Schreiber. I would not have told you that this was Ali either. He did an incredible job of projecting a completely different voice. Just as as a voice actor, I'm very impressed with his chops in this movie. But
so, what are your thoughts about the fact that Donald Glover has actually already played Aaron Davis in Spider-Man: Homecoming?
I had actually totally forgot that went down. You never see him as the Prowler.
No, you don't see him as he's selling the weapons out of the back of his van.
Yeah, he's just kind of a low level criminal, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. That would be a really interesting character to see in the MCU. I don't know that he was the Prowler yet. I mean, that's it seems like he's just begun his life of crime. And of course, they wanted Donald Glover to be part of it. There was actually a talk about him being Miles Morales for a while.
Because he was the inspiration for the look of the character.
Yeah, and he's a huge Spider-Man nerd and wanted to be tied to it. So, he wanted to be included. So it'd be fun to get more Donald Glover in that role. But, I mean, obviously there doesn't need to be any real connection between the two. So,
finally, because again, we could spend all day talking about characters here. I mean, no offense, love Lily Tomlin as Aunt May, but we'll move on from that.
Yeah.
I just want to hit very quickly for those of you who don't stay for end credits. Who are you? Have you never watched a Marvel movie?
Yeah, no kidding.
At the end of the credits, we do get a tease of Miguel O'Hara, a.k.a. Spider-Man 2099. And his possible needing to get to Miles. I wasn't 100% clear on what his reason for needing to be able to travel through the dimensions are.
Right.
And then, of course, they just play it off as a joke of the famous meme of the Spider-Man pointing to each other.
Yeah.
So it was kind of silly. And then we're talking about all these big actors, and then you got Oscar Isaac voicing him.
Right. Just out of nowhere. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It is fantastic. You got to wonder if just like Oscar Isaac wasn't like on the next soundstage over one day, and they were like, "Hey, man, like, you want to come and do this real quick or something?" I don't know. So, one of my favorite parts of the movie, and I like lots of parts of this movie. So, I was a huge 2099 fan when it first appeared. I was
like in the 90s.
Yeah, and I was the perfect age for that, and it was such a cutting edge look, and it was so different than the Spider-Man you had as a kid, and it was just interesting. And I mean, obviously, comic books have always been on the cutting edge of inclusivity or whatever you want to call it, but they kind of bumped it up to a next level, even with just kind of an ethnic ambiguity of the character's name and stuff like that. Like, it's very, very interesting. And he's a huge part of the Spider-Verse comic run. So I think that also was Lord Miller kind of poking the bear a little bit, that they knew they're letting you know without spelling it out that, like, hey man, they know what the comics were, and that hopefully we'll be back. And here we are a few years later, and they're making part 2. So I'm pretty happy.
Do you love movies of a certain age? Do you miss the days of VHS tapes and VCRs and video rental stores? Does the thought of another 80s movie being remade seem inconceivable? If you want to go back to school, back to the future, or even back to the beach, then the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast is for you. I'm Tim Williams, the creator and host, and on each episode, I'm joined by a guest co-host as we revisit a different 80s flick to discuss our first-time watch memories, iconic scenes, and even learn some behind-the-scenes stories along the way. New episodes drop every other Friday on your favorite podcasting platform. So make like a tree, get out of here, and go listen to an episode of the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast.
All right, so let's get into those moving panels. This one's interesting because it's amazing storyline, but they use none of it in the movie.
I was thinking as I read it, I was like, man, and we thought that they veered way off of the comic in Old Man Logan versus Logan. Like, they're spider people. That's the total extent of the connection. Like, it's
and this movie at least reined it in and only made it 5 different dimensions coming in versus the storyline, which just goes everywhere.
There's like 45 or more spider people. It's wild.
So the storyline takes place through the Amazing Spider-Man number 15 ends at 15, 9 through 15. Although there are some specific side stories that were written just to go along with the storyline. There's a Spider-Verse, 3-issue run. There's a Spider-Man team-up run made specifically for this storyline. Scarlet Spiders. There was a Spider-Woman connection. There's a Spider-Man 2099.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go off and read those to read kind of what's happening with some of the other Spider-Men as they're facing these multi-dimensional vampire-like creatures called the Inheritors.
Yep.
I didn't quite understand. The one thing they never explain is why does it have to be the spider, as they call it, the spider totem?
Yeah.
Like, why is it the spider totem that they have to consume? They never really explain that in the comic run.
And unlike, say, a Blade run in a typical vampiric setting, they're not trying to farm spider people. They're trying to wipe them out as well. So no, I agree with you. That's probably the flimsiest part of this particular comic run. You don't really understand who or what these guys are, but similar, again, going back to Old Man Logan, they're kind of this weird group of almost hillbillies. Like, they there's a lot of
Yeah.
infighting in the family, and it kind of, I don't know. Obviously, a few of them are smarter than the others. It's a very strange dynamic. I mean, you have the whole episode where a team of spider people are only able to escape because you have a brother and sister that show up fighting the one that has all but defeated 6 Spider-Men at the same time. And they're able to escape because of this infighting in the family and everything. It is a very strange villain. I think they almost had to do something like that, though, in the sense that I don't think you can just transplant any given villains that we already have in the Spider Universe to do this.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I'm wrong.
I agree
Maybe
with
you
that.
could tell the story where Norman Osborn figures out there's other universes and goes around trying to kill all of the Spider-Men or something like. But I don't know. This was kind of fun and different. So.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, but the story of the Inheritors is so weak because you don't know why they're after the spider totems other than by ingesting, and they say ingest, they don't actually eat them. It's like they just suck their life force out.
Yeah.
That by doing that, it increases their power, and yet they still can die, but then their clones come back.
Yeah.
So that's how they're actually immortal, is because they're cloning themselves. And then there's this, they have found this one dimension that seems to be the center of all of the multiverse, and there's a web, and there's the spider that's on the web that's forming all of this and controls all of this, and part of me is going, wait, so wouldn't he also be like a really powerful spider for them?
Nope.
Yeah.
And even the name, I'm not 100% sure what they were inheriting. Like, it's a very strange dynamic.
They were trying to get they wanted control of all the multiverse.
But even when...
and then there's a prophecy. Man. Of course, there's a prophecy.
Which one of them is it? I can't remember the name of... They all have very strange and hard to pronounce names also.
Yeah, and then there was like 2 of them that were interchangeable. As far as
the one... I keep wanting to say Kane, but that's one of the Spider-Man.
Kane was one of the Spider-Man.
Yeah. But the one that betrays the Inheritors, that actually turns coat. I can't remember his name. Like, but the way he describes it, he's not like, I'll betray my family, or, and he says he's rejecting his inheritance. And you're like, okay, I'm not really sure what that means, but cool.
Which, that one, was it, mine's going blank. Was it Karn?
Yes.
Was that Karn?
Yes. That's why I keep trying to interchange it with Kane.
So... and I didn't go back.
I mean, there's
to
only
read...
like 94 names to remember in this, so,
Yeah. So I didn't go back to read the story, but apparently he had already faced off against Spider-Man.
Right.
Like the main timeline Spider-Man.
Right.
And he had lost, and so that's why he had been
I thought that was Moreland.
Exiled.
I thought that was...
Or maybe it was Moreland.
I think it's Moreland, the first one you meet.
Okay. So, I don't know.
So, I guess...
Because...
We're getting confused.
Yeah, this is why this is all getting confused. No, because Karn's the one that has the mask on. And then he ends up at the end of the story, he becomes the Master Weaver.
Mm-hmm.
Which made me go, wait, is this a time circle thing? Because the Master Weaver, the one that ends up being killed...
by Superior Spider-Man.
Yeah, Superior Spider-Man. He also had a mask the entire time. I thought there was going to be some reveal. And then I
never thought about that.
Well, but then don't they take his mask off? I'm trying to remember now. They take his mask off and they just go, yeah, you're nobody.
Yeah.
Like after Superior Spider-Man kills him? I don't know. Which that's another thing. The whole Superior Spider. So this storyline's also
I was about
heavily
to say.
connected
Yeah.
to the Superior Spider-Man storyline, where Doc Ock is in the body
His
of Peter
brain
Parker.
is in Peter Parker's body. Yeah.
Yeah, and they do a whole thing where when he meets with the main timeline Peter Parker,
Right.
Which they call the Chosen One,
Right.
he thinks that it's a past version of him when it's actually the future version of him because he's already
he's
won
afraid
over
of
that.
creating a paradox if he kills our Spider-Man, and and key Spider-Man, the Chosen, whatever you want to call him, has to use that because Superior Spider-Man kind of is smarter and superior, so and obviously less ethical, so he was ready to kill our Spider-Man. But yeah, we find out that Superior Spider-Man is actually the one that brought most of the Spider-Men together. He's the one that brainchilds, all of them getting together. We see it through his eyes, which is a cool storytelling method. So he goes to 2099, has to find a way back from that. I'm obviously way oversimplifying all this. And then when he comes back, he starts finding dead Spider-Man. And so you see like a dead Iron Spider. I'm trying to remember who all it is, but there's several incarnations of Spider-Man that are killed, and Superior Spider-Man finds them, and he starts theorizing that he needs to collect the ones that are still have survived to defeat whatever it is that is killing the Spider-Man. So he starts team building, and even that's a really cool book when he saves Spider-Man India, and Spider-Man India is like, I would be honored to be the first of your team of Spider-Man, and then he pops into where he's got 10 other Spider-Men stowed. Yeah. So it's pretty cool.
So I can't get away from the Inheritors.
Yeah.
Like, were they, because this was my other problem with it, were they too powerful of characters that the writer, do you think, wrote himself into a corner? And then, because to me, the way that they just, the way that they defeat them at the end just seems kind of like okay, well, that's over.
Yeah, no, I could understand that. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really think about it through that lens, but yeah, they were that, and I'm not sure he made them such a pointed tool against Spider-Man that you run the risk of making the whole thing seem very, it would be hard to take seriously if you had to bring in other Marvel characters to defeat him. Does that make any sense at all? Like, so it's
yeah. So instead,
yeah,
just to go into this part. So instead, you've got Solus, who is their father, who is, they keep in shadow for the first few times you see him. You just get these panels of like really close up on his face. So you don't get a good look at him. Then he finally shows up, and okay, he's just a big, Santa Claus looking dude. And then he apparently is the most powerful one of all of them. He takes on that cosmic Spider-Man who's like a god and just destroys him as if he was nothing.
Even that one's a little weird. I kind of wonder what the writer backed himself into on that one, because he doesn't really tell you whatever you want to call him. I think that's a great name for lack of a different one. Cosmic Spider-Man. He has the powers of the universe.
Yeah.
That's his powers.
Mm-hmm.
And he was powerful enough that he has the Spider Sanctuary where all the Spider-Men can hide.
Yeah, the safe zone, as they call it.
Yeah. And so, I do agree. And then you're right. Like, the father just shows up and just goes face to face with him and sucks his soul out.
Yeah.
You're
just
like,
demolishes him and sucks his soul. But then, so going back, so what does it take to stop him? Well, let's just have the Kane Spider-Man turn into a giant spider.
Yeah.
And then just stab him with his legs. I was just, really? That's how we're going to end this.
Yeah, man.
That's how we're going to end this. Okay.
And you're
then, of
wondering
course,
why Lord Miller wrote a different villain. Come on.
So again, we talked enough about the storyline, and I mean, it's just very different.
It is a good
great read, though.
It is a
great
good read.
Yeah, it is a great read. Highly recommend it. I mean, I started and finished it within a week, and that's with working and having kids and it being around Christmas time and all the stuff that goes with that. But I got through it. It's a great read. Highly recommend it. But let's get back into kind of its connection with the movie.
Now that we've confused everyone, and
yeah, there you go. So, of course, like we said at the beginning, the only connection it has with the movie is the idea of a Spider-Verse.
Right. Yeah, pretty much.
That's really it. I mean, we do start off with the death of a Spider-Man, which is how the storyline starts off, as we see a death of a Spider-Man. So we have actually...
I almost argued that all of the Spider-Men are from the book, but that's not altogether true either. I mean, I don't know. I mean, because you have Spider-Man, Peter Parker, and you have Peter B. Parker in the movie, which you don't really see that blatant of a double in the comic run. But the other Spider-Man that join Miles Morales, who also is in the books, we didn't really mention him when we were going through that, but he's also in the books. So you have, but Miles is not the main character by a long shot.
No, it is just Peter Parker.
Regular Peter Parker.
Yeah, regular Peter Parker. I mentioned this earlier in the episode and forgot to come back to it. So when I come back to it, there's a part in the comics where two of the Spider-Man, while they're in a fight, run out of web fluid. Mm-hmm. And so while they're reloading, they're just chatting with each other. In the middle of this battle, they're just chatting with each other. Yeah. And they talk about all the different Spider-Men that they're seeing. And they were like, yeah, there was this one dude, could have swear he took his mask off, looked just like the guy from Seabiscuit.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is Tobey Maguire. And then the other guy says, yeah, I saw one that reminded me of the guy from The Social Network. Yeah. Which is referring to Andrew Garfield. Yeah. So I got a kick out of that.
And I mean, you do get some really, I know we were trying to get away from the book, but there are some really, really interesting kind of twists on how to do Spider-Man. And I'm not sure, I would venture to guess that somebody had read a lot of Batman and decided to also, take a Batman, an alternate universe Batman stab at Spider-Man and makes Uncle Ben Spider-Man. Yeah. And that one's really kind of interesting because apparently Peter Parker tried to get him to use it to make money, not to, save people and everything. And so it's pretty interesting. And
they do a Aunt May Spider-Man too.
Mm-hmm.
That was
and Assassin Spider-Man, and I mean, you name it. If anybody's ever been remotely had spider powers, they were in the book. Even Black Widow, despite the fact that she has never been given any spider powers, has a spider name, so she was in the book. So,
yeah, there you go. Yeah. Why not? But going back, so it's kind of pretty cool that we are recording this episode today. I'll go ahead and reveal this episode will come out on this. It's coming out this Monday. We're recording it on Saturday, the 4th, and they just released a little bit more information about the sequel.
Oh,
yeah. So I have not watched it yet, but I have heard that there is at least a quick shot or a reference or something to Spider-Woman, who is a main part of a really main part of the storyline. Because we end up finding out in the comic that the Master Weaver actually altered small parts of the web so that what's her name? Jessica.
I honestly was just looking it up. It's
Jessica Drew.
Yeah.
Drew. Not Cruz, Drew. Wow, I never realized how close those were.
Yeah.
DC has a Green Lantern named Jessica Cruz.
Right.
And Spider-Woman is Jessica Drew.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I thought Jessica Drew, but that was, I don't know. Anyways, yes.
Yeah, so they have, so in the comic, the Master Weaver altered it so that she became a handmaid slash lover of one of the inheritors, so that when the main timeline Spider-Woman came there, she could switch places with her. And again, that story is so...
It's very convoluted. Yeah.
Yeah. So convoluted.
It's interesting, but yeah.
With that being said, so we've got the sequel for this is coming out next year. October of next year is the date they have right now. And they are titling it Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which I think is a very interesting title.
Yeah.
Because to me, that implies that instead of the Spider-Verse coming to Miles, it makes it sound to me like Miles is going to travel through the Spider-Verse.
Well, I mean, we do get the end credit scene, like right as the credits roll, that Gwen Stacy's Spider-Gwen is communicating to Miles, like right as it kicks off. So, I mean, they did kind of, I feel like anyways, they told you where they were going to take it. And even his little monologue about that, like, he just knows that he's not alone, that, you know, there are others like him kind of thing. That altogether read to me that he's going to venture into other worlds than his own, to me.
Yeah. And so I'm curious, you know, will we get to see some of these other, I mean, they've obviously already shown us Spider-Man 2099. You know, now they're showing Spider-Woman. You know, will we get to see some of these other versions of Spider? Will we get Spider-Monkey, which there's a little bit in the
Old Man Spider.
Yeah. So,
but to be fair, like, just to play devil's advocate for a second, do they run the risk of just rehashing Loki?
Ooh, yeah. Well, see, that's the other thing. So I guess we have to assume that this is not connected to the MCU at all.
I mean,
I know. It's
we have a multiverse and then a multiverse, all from the Marvel universe, and they're not connected. I don't know, man. Like,
yeah, and see, that's what's so weird is because Sony is the one studio that has still been able to hold out with the Marvel, Disney expansion, in which Marvel has gotten back a lot of their characters. You know, Sony's still holding on strong to the Spider-Man license and just using those characters. Again, we got Venom, Let There Be Carnage.
We're about to get Morbius.
Yeah. We're about to get Morbius, and of course they're doing it through this Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I failed to mention the title not only is Across the Spider-Verse, it's Across the Spider-Verse Part 1. Yeah. That is the official title of the movie. Is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse Part 1.
Nice.
So, very curious. So, I actually want to do something with you, Chad, since this just came out, like it literally came out just a few hours ago before we started. We started running. We're going to pause, and we are going to watch the little teaser that came out, and then we'll come back on, and we will kind of talk about our reaction to it. So hang tight with us, and of course it'll seem like nothing in this edit, but we'll come back and tell you what we think. All right, so we just watched the trailer there. Now I don't know where people are getting the Spider-Woman thing that I read, unless those flashes you see at the end, somebody's doing some pausing and seeing what's in some of those little shatters. So we see Miles get visited by Gwen. We see a direct Miles
continuation of the end of the first movie. So
yeah. Then we see Miles fall through what appears to be a portal into the multiverse.
Mm-hmm.
He ends up in a very animated, like more so like pop animated world where he is then attacked. It looked like attacked by Spider-Man 2099. Yeah, very interesting little teaser that they gave us there. And then playing off of the possible relationship between Gwen Stacy, Spider-Gwen, and Miles, which I know has happened in the comics.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. It looks good. The thing that stuck out to me was the shifting into a completely different animation style as he went through the portal. That was pretty slick. Yeah, I might have to watch that a few more times. That's but
yeah, you have to break it down, pause, and see what little details we can see and all that. It, however, reminded me of something I actually wanted to bring up, because we see some stuff floating around in Miles's bedroom, and one of them is one of his Spider-Man comics.
Yes.
Which made me bring up. So Spider-Man comics exist in a world with Spider-Man.
As do
Not
apparently
only
Spider-Man cartoons, Spider-Man popsicles, Spider-Man Christmas albums.
Yeah.
I mean...
But my thing was the comic, because when Miles is bitten, he, has this little experience where he's getting stuck to stuff and things are happening. And then he gets his Spider-Man comic and he sees...
to figure out how to do it.
But part of me is going, so in the comics, do we know that he's Peter Parker?
Peter Parker. Yeah. Well, I mean, they're really meta about the comic book relationship in the movie. I wanted to bring this up, the point that they use the first issue covers to introduce each one. And I think as a storytelling element, it was brilliant. It kind of seamlessly rolls through it. You get to pause and get an origin story for each of these characters without it taking a lot of time. It doesn't draw you away from the main story. It's, just their little synopsis of their issue one, it seems like. Almost every time we get a new Spider-Man. And it gives you the payoff at the end when you get Miles's book thrown onto the pile of all the other Spider-Man books that we've got. And it's just I personally think it's a fantastic just storytelling tool that they used. But it is kind of weird in the sense that you're talking about, that he learns from a Spider-Man book how to be Spider-Man. It was just already built in. But they had even preempted that in the sense that when you meet Spider-Man, before Miles is even introduced or bitten or anything, you have Spider-Man telling you about his life as if it's, this stuff's all entwined into it. It's pretty cool.
But which you brought in the album, I want to point out again for people who don't sit through the credits, you get to hear the entire song in the credits. So I just want to point that out. All right. Well, I think with that conversation, we've moved into our final decisions, whether we bag it, stack it, or trade it. Our final decisions start to become very obvious as we go through these, especially when it's me and you talking.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Chad. What do you say?
So, okay, I have to caveat this a little bit, and probably no listener cares, but this movie holds a very special place in my heart. Because when my daughter was born, when my son was born and was very, very young, my daughter was just 2 years old, and she had not really sat through any movie that was not, a Blues Clues related, something very, very, very short and children centric. And I wanted to see this movie very, very bad. It had just come to... I did not get to see it at the theater, unfortunately. It had just come to video. And so late one night, with kids keeping us up, me and my daughter sat down and watched Into the Spider-Verse. And she was mesmerized, which I'm assuming you've seen the movie, as a listener. I can understand why. It's like an acid trip. With all the the colors and everything else. So she was very into it. So it was the first movie that she ever watched. She and I sat there. It's kind of a big deal to me. So I have to kind of say that, and that I have an inherent bias. But that being said, I honestly think I could make a case that this should have not won Best Animated Feature, but Best Feature at the Academy Awards the year it came out.
Bold statement.
I think that, at virtually every portion of movie making, you could make the case that this is like just very, very high level storytelling. The soundtrack is perfect. The songs they choose are amazing.
Sorry to interrupt you,
Yeah.
but the teaser we just watched, the music that plays
still
at
uses
the
Sunflower.
beginning of that, yeah.
The score is great. The how they tell you, emotionally that things are happening through the use of music is fantastic. The way that they draw the story out using comic book elements, like we were talking about, using the actual comic books and giving you these, neat little referencing the fact that, you're in on the joke. You know what comic books are. This is how origin stories happen. So they just give it to you that way. And stuff like that. I even think that the way they animated it, so that there's so many scenes where it just has that slight blur from the old school cheap comic book printing, it was incorporated into the movie. All of that stuff is so genius, and they understood their audience so well. I really think it's a brilliant movie. It's really well told. Like, they know their audience, they know who they're talking to, who they're emotionally appealing to, and how to do it well. And even the fact that you're going to have multiple generations of people watching this movie, because as a guy at 40 years old, I'm identifying a little more with Peter B. Parker, and you get the payoff at the end where he kind of gets to have his moment of realization as Miles lets him go and go back into his world, as he has his moment of doubt and everything. It's just a really, really, really well told story. I think there's, to be very cliche, something in it for everybody. Like, you don't have to be a Spider-Man fan. They don't drag you through the comic book stuff in the sense that you don't have to know, Earth 161 or, any of that sort of stuff. It's just incredibly well told story. So
I agree.
So stack it. I'm just
totally agree. I'm right there. You're saying all this as you kept talking. I'm like, okay, Chad's giving me nothing to add.
Sorry, man.
No, you're good. I'm right there with you. I echo a lot of what you said. I again think the storytelling. This is one of the best in terms of storytelling. Mm-hmm. One of the best comic book movies in existence. Live action, animated, in terms of storytelling. But yes, the animation. I love this is, and I know we've talked about this with others, but I could definitely say at any point you just hit the pause button, you're looking at a frame, you're looking at a panel.
At a panel, yep.
Yeah, just done. Period. Doesn't matter what's happening. You hit pause, that's a panel. So I totally agree with everything you just said. I'm right there with you. I have like I said, my only problem with the movie, and this is a weak thing to have a problem with, is the fact that it's 2 hours. And that's really my only problem with it. That
being said, I don't know what you could cut.
I don't either. We talked about earlier.
Yeah, it moves so well. Back to the whole it being such a well-told story. There's none of it where you go like, man, that was kind of slow. That didn't really keep pace with the rest of the movie or anything. Like it just... And almost all the characters get some sort of payoff. I mean, obviously to varying degrees, because Spider-Ham is not going to have a, super touching emotional moment, but it's an incredible movie.
It is. It absolutely is. So again, if you haven't seen it, I mean, go see it. Even if we have spoiled it for you, still go see it.
Yep.
Get out there and see it. Find it on somewhere. Borrow it from somebody.
So, I don't know. I could talk about this movie for hours and hours and hours. Of course, me and you could talk about most movies for hours. But just one of the few points that really show like what a good story it was is you get the time when Miles he turns the corner. He's embraced his powers. He's going to go catch up with the other Spider-Men that are going to stop the collider and keep the universe from imploding and, all this kind of stuff. And he goes to Aunt May's house and goes into Spider-Man's shed, whatever you want to call it. And she's waiting for him. And she clearly believed in him and that he was going to come. Like all the other Spider-Men had even kind of written him off, that he wasn't far enough along yet. And you get the thing from her, what took you so long?
Yeah,
and
took you long enough.
It makes me smile, man. There's such a great payoff from all of it.
No, I agree. And you talking about your daughter sitting down to watch it. I mean, my daughter watched it with me as I was, she had seen it with me when I first saw it, but watching it to prep for this episode, she's watching it with me. And of course, she's a little bit older than she was when we first watched it. And, she's a little bit older than your daughter. And we talked about how much is in this movie, and she's questioning all of it. And I'm going, I can't answer that right now.
We don't have 3 days to go over this.
Or there's too much here for me to explain to you. But your thing about how it visually goes after kind of the younger audience, it reminds me a lot. Not reminds me, because this movie came afterwards, and it was from the same people. But it was the same thing with the Mitchells versus the Machines that came on Netflix. It has that same storytelling element, and it's framed pretty much the same way. You could, like I just said with that, you could really hit pause during that movie just about at any point, and it looks like a panel out of a comic. So they've really got something with this style of animation, and I'm curious to see more of it, and to be honest. Yeah,
the ones that get I won't say overly, because as a comic book guy, I of course appreciate it, but it was kind of funny watching it with my wife the first time. She was like, is this movie supposed to be in 3D? Like, are we supposed to have glasses on to watch this? And you're like, no, sweetie, like that's the way old comic books were. Everything had to go to the printer pretty fast, and colors didn't always line up, and all that kind of stuff. So
yep. Yeah, not all the colors were say line up, but not all the colors were actually in the lines.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I think that about wraps it up for us here. Again, like we've always said, Chad and I can talk for hours on any of these topics, and we could continue on to this, but we're going to go ahead and end it for now. Thanks for listening. Please follow us on social media. Let your friends know about this awesome podcast that is Moving Panels. Go out and support our sister podcast, the 80s Flick Flashback with Tim. And hey, we might even grow some more podcasts in our little community here. But for today, thanks, Chad. It was a pleasure. And for the sake of the podcast, I know you and I will talk again, but for the sake of the podcast, I just want to wish you happy holidays.
Yeah, you too, man.
Because I don't know if we'll do another episode between now and the new year.
Yeah.
But you and I will definitely talk outside of the podcast. But for everybody else out there, enjoy the beginning of this holiday season. We're going to bring you Christmas episodes coming soon, so look out for those. But for today, for Moving Panels, I'm Laramy Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.